Dan, WrestleMania just happened on Sunday. What was your takeaway from that event?
That no television show should be 5.5 hours long.
Yeah.
There were too many emotional peaks. So like usually at WrestleMania, you build to one underdog, finally has his day, holding the championship up. They had like 6 of those.
Yep.
So by the time they got to the main event, I was exhausted. Admittedly, I'd been watching most of it on my phone in a bar at the hotel I'm staying in, and then on my laptop in my hotel room, which is not the most pleasant way to watch television.
Yeah, Dan, I didn't quite get the full experience of WWE. I was in Montreal, Canada for a friend's bachelor party of the weekend. Did catch the last couple hours of the show. I tell you what, the Triple H Batista match I thought was incredible. Good job kind of working the different body parts and things like that. I thought that was a great example of good wrestling. Dan, today, we're talking a little bit about WrestleMania, a little bit about wrestling. We both like that a lot, but we're going to talk about WWE as a business today,
probably should
as well. And so first, off the top of the show, let's talk about just where they make their money. As many people will know, WWE is the premier global wrestling brand. You can consider them the NFL of professional wrestling. Where are they making their money? Where does most of their money come from as a business, Dan?
Television rights.
Yep.
So and this has been a huge question mark until very recently for WWE. They were always a difficult television property in that wrestling is considered a little downstream. WWE's done a good job getting mainstream advertisers to be willing to advertise, but that's kind of a recent thing. So for the last few cycles of TV rights before the current one, their deal would come up and they would only have one bidder. So Comcast would say, hey, yeah, we'll give you a little more, but there weren't. Now the rights world has exploded so much that Comcast is paying them basically what they used to pay for 5 hours of programming for just the 3-hour Monday night show. And Fox is paying them $1 billion over 5 years on top of that for their sort of number 2 show, which is actually going to be on network broadcast television.
Yeah, Dan, let's unpack a little. We'll talk a little bit later about the details around those TV deals. But just to start off, let's unpack a little bit about what rights we're selling. So WWE produces 5 hours of weekly original content. You mentioned they have 2 shows. They have Raw, which has been on.
So those are the A-list shows. The WWE actually produces all sorts of, let's call it curtain programming. The main event, which is a 1-hour show to just sort of get some of the talent on the card. They have NXT, which is their sort of like AAA territory. They have 205 Live, which is the lighter weight wrestlers who fly around more. Some of that's programming that's on their network. WWE Network is a paid subscription service. It was a hedge against what if nobody bid for one of these properties? Well, we could take it, put it on our own network, maybe add 1 million subscribers, keep the revenue in sort of the same place. And then they also have the TV revenue from their E-deal and their USA deal for Ms. and Mrs., which is a reality show, Total Divas, Total Bellas, which are reality shows. Then there's the sort of like occasional tryout stuff. They've had cartoons. They had a Saturday morning kid show. They have different cuts of things for international. I don't know if they have a Hulu show still, but they used to have an edited version of Raw for Hulu.
They still have that.
They still have that. Yeah. So, but the bulk of their money is made from licensing Raw and SmackDown, the 2 A-list shows, not just in the U.S. The U.S. is the most important deal, but there's also huge money for them to be made in some of the major markets around the world.
Right. Dan, yeah, so you're exactly right. The media portion of the business, as we mentioned, is about 73% of their revenue. You mentioned the network aspect of the business. That's been an interesting phenomenon over the past several years. They launched that in 2014 and have transitioned from their old pay-per-view model to this more consistent, you pay $9.99 a month as a network subscriber, and you get all the pay-per-views each month.
So the premise of the network makes sense. But in some ways, there was a disconnect. So they looked at me and you, and they said, okay, you guys are wrestling fans, but you're only buying maybe WrestleMania, and like once a year, there's a pay-per-view that like, oh, I really want to see that. So you're spending $59.99 twice a year. That's $120. That's $9.99 a month. So the proposition was, I bet for $9.99 a month, Dan and Nick would want all the pay-per-views, all this archival content, some original shows we produce, some highlights, some documentary, all sorts of cool stuff. And actually, the answer has mostly been somehow that math doesn't compute to people because they thought they would have 2 million subscribers a year ago. They have about 1.3, 1.5. And that number goes down after WrestleMania season. And It hasn't been the global success they thought it would be, but there's a caveat to that. The second they signed these television deals, they, for 5 years, decided that the network would be downplayed, that they're not going to produce as much original programming there. They almost never mention the network on the television shows, which used to be like an endless refrain of $9.99 a month, because they don't need the network as much as they used to, and they have to make sure people watch their key shows or else those deals are going to go away.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of phenomenon how that fits into part of their business. It's something to watch going forward. As you said, it hasn't quite grown as much as the business would have liked. But when you've got, an audience of 1.5 million subscribers, you can kind of depend on month over month. Interesting part of the business. As we mentioned, Dan, the media is the biggest part of the business, over 70% of their revenue, and that's been growing over time as sports and sports-related media rights have been moving up over time. However, the rest of their revenue comes from producing live events as well as selling merchandise. And those haven't seen quite as much growth over the past few years, have declined as a portion of revenue over the past several years. Live attendance over the past several quarters has been down in the mid-single digit range. How should we think about those aspects of WWE's business and how it fits into the investment thesis for the company?
Wrestling tends to be cyclical. You have a breakout character like The Rock or Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that drives merchandise sales, drives the business. It makes it cool, because a fifth grader is not going to buy a wrestling T-shirt if it's not cool. So certainly an adult male is not wearing a wrestling T-shirt unless wrestling is very in vogue or we're very out of touch. So right now, the hot wrestling tends to be the smaller independent scene. I don't know if you've seen Bullet Club T-shirts out there. They're a New Japan wrestling faction. Chris Jericho, a very famous longtime WWE wrestler, is sort of on his own and working with a new group, has done really well selling shirts at Hot Topic, where some of the people wearing Chris Jericho shirts or Young Bucks shirts bought at Hot Topic have no idea that they're wrestlers. They might think they're bands or just logos or who knows what, but the cool factor isn't there. So WWE is going to be hurt by that. They're also hurt by their number one star in terms of mainstream appeal is John Cena. He sells an enormous amount of merchandise to kids. Well, he's barely active. He's a Hollywood movie star who comes back for big shows. So when there's an arena show, he's not on the show. So the kids aren't buying his hat and his sign and his T-shirt and his headband and probably his bobblehead doll and his ice cream and who the hell knows what else. But that's going to hurt merchandise sales. Maybe this pops back up because some of the women wrestlers are sort of having a creative peak, and maybe it becomes more cool for girls to wear Charlotte Flair or Becky Lynch or Ronda Rousey shirts, but that hasn't in any way been the case yet.